This week on the Manifest Telecast, we want to show you one more final excerpt from our series on unlocking that Daniel cipher from the teaching that we did, 4 hours of teaching on the book of Daniel. So watch very carefully, and I'll be back at the end of the program. I believe you're going to learn something today watching Manifest.
Welcome to Manifest, hosted by international evangelist, teacher, and author Perry Stone. Enjoy unique insight into prophetic and practical truth. It's time to feast on fresh manna, so get ready to be blessed and encouraged. And now, here is your host and teacher, Perry Stone.
All right, so here's the question. Which one of these empires will the Antichrist come from? All right, let's look at it. Well, will he come from Egypt? According to Daniel chapter 11, 42 through 43, the Antichrist will take over Egypt, Libya, and Ethiopia. So he takes it over. He conquers it. He takes over Egypt, and it says the Libyans and the Ethiopians are at his footsteps. They follow him. So that's not his headquarters if he invades it in the middle of the tribulation and takes it over, okay? So we can eliminate that as being the place where he rules from the first 42 months. Number two, what about Turkey? Now in Daniel 11 verse 44, it says the king of the north will push at the Antichrist and the king of the south will come against him. Now the king of the north there is not Russia. The king of the north there is the area of Turkey. And Turkey already is almost at war with Syria. There's a lot of animosity in that part of the world with the Turks and the Kurds and the Syrians, the Iraqis, and all of that type of thing. So if Turkey pushes at him in a war, he doesn't come out of Turkey. They're pushing at him because he's coming out of somewhere else. What about Greece? Now this is interesting. Greece is now part of the EU, but Greece economically is not a superpower. Greece has had economic problems. They've had rioting. They've had austerity measures. They can't make their payments. But this leaves one area. It goes back to the stump. See how important that chapter was about the stump? The more you get into this, it's very important to understand this. So it goes back to the stump. So what's the stump? The stump is the area of Lebanon, Syria, and Iraq, or what we would call the old Babylonian territory. Now, in the book of Daniel, it says that the Antichrist is great to the east, great to the south, and great toward the pleasant land. The pleasant land is Israel. The south is the northern part of Africa. We talked about that, Egypt, Libya, and Ethiopia, Daniel 11, that he'll take over. But it also says he's great to the east. Now, anytime you read a measurement in the Bible where it talks about north, south, east, and west, you don't think of it where America is. It's talking about north, south, east, and west where Israel is located. And so if you look at this prophecy, it very much tells you that the Antichrist will be great to the east. This would include Jordan, Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, all which are definitely Islamic countries. Daniel chapter 8, verse 9, great to the south, the east, and to the pleasant land. So please keep in mind that in history, in the prophetic history of empires, Babylon, Media, Persia, and Greece, their kings and leaders all ruled from Babylon. Keep in mind that the tree stump is Babylon. Remember, it was the Babylonian kingdom in Nebuchadnezzar's day. It's cut down, meaning it doesn't exist now. It's just a stump, but the stump is still in the earth. And the reason that you have Rome and you have Greece, because Rome, the Antichrist is going to take over all that territory of the ancient Roman Empire. And the second thing is when it comes to Greece, we've already talked about Greece, that how that the division of Greece, the 4 divisions, reveal the area where the Antichrist is going to come from. So in other words, if you just go to Daniel, pay attention to Daniel, you're going to discover that the Antichrist will come out of the territory that we're talking about here. My, I tell you what, I'm getting a download right now, and I don't know if I should go there or just save it for later. I think I'll save it for later because I'll get so far ahead of myself. So Babylon is going to be very, very significant. Now, the 4th empire Bible prophecy, let's look at this. The 4th kingdom shall be as iron, for as much as iron breaks in pieces and subdues all things, and as iron that breaks all things shall it break in pieces and bruise. Daniel 7:7. After this I saw in the night vision, behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible, strong exceeding. And it had great iron teeth that devoured and brake in pieces and stomped the residue with the feet of it. And it was diverse from all of the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. And this is what scholars call the non-descriptive beast. He doesn't tell you what it looks like. I will add to you, John in Revelation tells you what this beast looks like, but Daniel did not tell you what it looked like. I personally think what he saw in this fourth beast was a little bit confusing, and he's just kind of giving you the basis of how the iron teeth stamping with its feet and having 10 horns. Daniel chapter 7, 19, and also verse 23. Let's read it. Then I would know the truth of the fourth beast, which was diverse from all the others, exceedingly dreadful, whose teeth were of iron, his nails of brass, and devoured, brake in pieces, and stamped with the residue with its feet. Thus saith he, the fourth beast shall be the fourth kingdom on the earth, which shall be diverse from all kingdoms. It shall devour the whole earth, tread it down, and break into pieces. Now, we do know that part of this fourth beast was the Roman Empire. This is a prophecy concerning the Roman Empire. In 200 to 196 BC were some of Rome's first military victories. And in 148 BC, Macedonia, which we now know is the area of Greece, the province of Greece, became a Roman province in 148 BC. The city of Corinth, Greece, was destroyed by the Romans in 146 BC, and later the great city of Athens was destroyed by the Romans in 86 BC, and that's when Rome eventually took over all of the territory of Greece, not just Macedonia, which was a part of it, but Macedonia and all of the territory that was known as Greece. Now, the iron of the Roman Empire, they began to expand, Rome did, to Britain, Spain, France, Greece, the Middle East. They took over the area of Judea, which we now know today is parts of Israel, and also all of the coast of northern Africa. That would be up in Morocco, the coast of Libya, and the coast of Egypt, all the coastal areas, because they had ships and they had to have ports for their ships to bring in their goods to import and to export. Here's what Rome was known for. They were known for infrastructure, for transportation, for building bridges, for building roads, and also for having numerous large ships. Rome was also known for their legions, for their large armies that kept the peace throughout the known Roman Empire. They also were known as the largest of all the other prophetic empires as they combined and added land, including parts of the western branch, which we talked about earlier, which would be Britain and Spain, etc. Also, Rome occupied the area of Judea, which we now know was parts of Israel, and they occupied the land, and they were occupying the land near and at the time of Christ. It was the Romans who in 70 AD would destroy the temple, destroyed Jerusalem, burn it to the ground, and scattered the Jews. In 71 AD, they salted the entire area and renamed the area. It was no longer Israel. It would be called Palestine from that point on until modern times. And 71 AD, they salted the area so nothing would ever grow there. Now, here's what began to happen. With Rome, with the time of the Roman Empire and the time of early Christianity, there was an emperor by the name of Nero. From the beginning of Nero, there were 10 major persecutions during the time of the Roman Empire that were set against Christians for about 3 centuries until the time of Emperor Constantine, when he came to power in the 4th century and he legalized Christianity, and the persecution, of course, began to fade at that particular time. Now, what I'd like to show you now, that's a little bit about the Fourth Empire. We read the Bible. We know a little bit about how the Romans were. We know a little bit about the history by studying it. We can go to the book of Daniel and understand he saw this empire coming and saw how vicious and powerful that it would actually be, and how in its day, it affected the entire known world. I do want to show you, however, all 4 empires of Bible prophecy that we talked about: Babylon, Media, Persia, Greece, and Rome, the 4 from the book of Daniel. Remember, with John, there's 7 because he starts with Egypt, but with Daniel, there's 4 because he starts with Babylon, okay? That's why you have John talking about the 7 heads, and you got Daniel over here talking about these different beasts, and there's 4 total. So watch this. Here's the amazing parallels of all 4 empires in Daniel's prophecy and what they had in common. Number 1, they all 4 ruled around the Mediterranean Sea area. Number 2, 3 of the 4 were headquartered in Babylon. Number 3, all 4 invaded or controlled Egypt. Number 4, all 4 empires were involved directly with the Jews in Israel. Number 5, all 4 were involved with the temple in Jerusalem in some manner. Number 6, all 4 were Gentile nations who ruled the known world. Notice that they were all Gentile nations. And finally, they all rule in in the very succession of what Daniel saw or what the king saw in Daniel 2 in Nebuchadnezzar's dream, and also they ruled in succession with the animals, the empires that Daniel saw in the form of symbolism and animals. Very, very interesting. The Roman Empire, however, eventually became divided. Now I want to show you something. Let's go with the big feet here because I want to show you this. And we can also show you this from the image, but I like these feet instead. When you begin to read in the book of Daniel, what you will discover is Rome is represented by the iron. We know that already. But I want you to be aware of the fact that the Roman Empire had a split, and I'm going to give you the basis of the split. Lactantius was an early church father that began to predict that the Roman Empire was going to be destroyed. And he made this prediction known to Emperor Constantine. Constantine came to power through a series of kind of supernatural events. He became a Christian, at least that's what history tells us, and he legalized Christianity. Bibles began to reappear. He began to let people have Bibles and copy Bibles and things of that nature. But watch this. What happens is Constantine believes Lactantius' prophecy, and he wants to build another Rome and name it after him. So he goes all the way over to Turkey, and we call it Turkey today. It was Asia Minor back in that day, but he goes over to what is called Turkey today, or Asia Minor, and he builds a city called Constantinople. Now, Rome was built on 7 hills, and Constantinople is built on 7 hills. And this city that he built became known as Constantinople, named, not necessarily named after him, but named after one of his relatives that followed him. So you have 2 Roman, and they are the old Rome and the new Rome, but they're 2 Romes nonetheless in the minds of people back then. One is in the west and one is in the east. And that's where the 2 legs come in, because one of these legs that goes all the way to the end of days represents what we would call Rome, Italy, and the other represents Constantinople, which later would be called Byzantium, with the headquarters of the Byzantine Empire, and then it would later be, from Byzantine, it would be called Istanbul, Turkey, in the 15th century when the Muslims would conquer that area and take it over. Now let's look at this, because this division of these 2 legs is very, very important when we talk about Bible prophecy. In the image of the dream, the 2 feet represent the east and the west. The 10 toes on this image, the 10 toes, and as you know in Daniel 2, we've talked about this, but there's 10 toes on the metallic image, and you see them here represented by these big, big feet, 10 toes. So when you see the 10 toes, let me talk to you about this because this is interesting. They represent 10 kings at the end of days. So when you read about the beast having 10 horns, and you read about in Daniel 2, the image having 10 toes, and you read in the book of Revelation, 10 horns with crowns, it's all the same thing. I want to make that clear. It's all the same thing. It is 10 regions of the earth, 10 nations at the end of days, with leaders over those nations who will give their kingdom over to the Antichrist. Now we're going to show you where these scriptures are found to help tie this together for you about these 10. First of all, the beast vision in Daniel 7:7. The 10 horns are 10 kings who shall arise from this kingdom, and another shall arise after them, and he shall be different from the first ones, and shall subdue 3 kings. Then in Revelation chapter 13, 1-2, then I stood on the sand of the sea. I saw a beast rising up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his horns 10 crowns, and on his heads a blasphemous name. Revelation chapter 17, 12-13, the 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings that have received no kingdom as yet, but they receive authority with 1 hour as kings with the beast. So in other words, you've got 10 horns, 10 toes, 10 horns that are crowned, all the same thing. Last day, 10 kings ruling with the Antichrist. Now, let's talk about a little bit about the progression, because I want to give you a little bit of history about these 2 legs over here that we've been talking about. I want to give you some history about the division and the split and so on. So follow me very carefully, because I don't want to just tell you, here's what it means. Let's talk about some history. The 2 legs of iron. The legs are long, and they stretch from the hips all the way to the ankles. In 395 AD, the Roman Empire took a final split into 2 divisions. Now, we gave you another date earlier. That's when it starts, but the final split was in 395 AD, it divided between the West and the East. In 410 AD, the Western Imperial Empire fell. That means the Empire of Rome fell from Rome, Italy, and the Roman Church and the Pope eventually took control of that area in what we would later call the Vatican Hill, where the Pope and the cardinals live. The Eastern Empire continued with what was called Constantinople, or later Byzantium, and the Byzantines formed an empire in the 5th century that ruled for almost 1,000 years, until the year 1453. I have to be careful. I'm dyslexic with numbers. And y'all know me, if I don't slow my numbers down, I get them all switched, okay? So I'm going to slow this down. The Western power of Rome, that's one leg, the Western powers of Rome ruled from 800 to 1800. And we can take you and talk about Napoleon in France and how he broke the power of the Pope and all that. That's why they say to 1800. So from the Charlemagne trying to form the Holy Roman Empire, 800, all Germany's connection, all that, 800 to 1800 is 1,000 years. The Western power of Rome continued for 1,000 years. The Eastern power of Rome continued from 400 to 1400 through the Byzantines, the Byzantine Empire, and what we call the Eastern branch of Christianity for about 1,000 years as well. So this is interesting. Both of those big legs we got over here, both of those big legs of iron, each one of them continued for about 1,000 years each, which brings us now into the feet, which takes us to the late 1800s and the early 1900s. Now this is interesting because the Bible talks about how there's going to be 2 feet, then there's going to be 10 toes. The 10 toes will come out of the 2 feet, all right? The 2 feet. Henry Kissinger made this statement, recorded in The Economist, November 19, 2008. Now that the clay feet of the economic system have been exposed, the gap between the global system for economics and the global political system based in the state must need be addressed as a dominant task. The clay feet, clay feet he talks about. Hippolytus, who was an early father, said, "As these things then are destined to come to pass, as the toes of the image turned out to be democracies, and the 10 horns of the beast are distributed among 10 kings." Now he calls the clay on the feet that are found in the image of Nebuchadnezzar's dream in Daniel 2, he calls them democracies. Now what is really interesting, Daniel chapter 2, 42 through 43, this is the New King James translation. "And as the toes of the feet were partly iron and partly clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly fragile. As you saw iron mixed with ceramic clay, they will mingle with the seed of men, but they will not adhere one to another, just as iron and clay does not mix." It's very clear that when you come to the time of the iron and clay mixture, it doesn't mix. It can't mix. Now, I'm going to show you what I believe. I do believe that in the late 1800s, the Communist Manifesto came, but the Russian Revolution didn't come into Russia till 1917, and that's when communism began to spread throughout the entire earth. Now, don't forget the toes right now and just think about 2 feet, all right? These feet are part clay and they are part iron. If you think about it, there's nothing more clearer than this being communism and democracy, because communism and democracy could not merge. Remember, Germany was divided. Part of it was iron, part of it was communist, and part of it was democracy, and part of it was clay. The West became the clay and the East became communist. Now what happened was, after 70 years in Russia, it began to break. It broke in Poland, it broke in Eastern Europe, it broke in Russia. And so they tried to bring democracy in where there was communism. Now here's what's weird. Democracy has worked in some areas, but the communists are still there, and they're still hardliners. Anybody that has traveled to Russia and some of these places will tell you what they have to deal with there and what the Christians are still dealing with. I'm talking about true Christians, not the underground church, not the open, Orthodox church, which is controlled by Russia and Russia controls them, etc. But the point is, the communism and the democracy looks like it works, but it still doesn't merge together. Look, China is totally still a communist nation, but they love all the money. Remember, Henry Kissinger said the clay of democracy is the economy. They love all the money coming over there from the democratic nations, but they don't want to change politically, okay? So they're trying to mix it, but the Bible says it does not mix. Now, let me show you the second part of this. Communism ruled for 70 years, just like the Babylonians controlled the Jews and Israel in Babylonian captivity for 70 years, and then it began to break. You come down to another iron, and I actually date this. Probably communism began to collapse about 1986, 87, 88 in Russia, and the Jews began to leave, and there's hundreds of thousands of Jews that have left Russia, come back to Israel. So I date this to about 1979, and there's a reason that I date this to 1979, and I won't go into the detail with it. It has to do with the Persian, the Iranian Revolution, it has to do with a lot of things that started happening that year. But the next iron and clay is democracy versus Islamic ideology. Not Islam itself, because there's no democracy battling Islam. Democracy is not trying to mix with Islam. Islam is a religion. It's trying to mix with the ideas, the political ideas behind Islam, okay? And so the next battle that we're in right now, I'm sorry, not battle, but the next mix has moved from communism to democracy to Islam and democracy. And guess what's happening? Just like communism and democracy don't mix, this is not mixing. For example, there was what was called a democratic uprising in Egypt. There was one in Libya, one in Syria, one in the West Bank of Israel. However, Islamic nations are working to form some type of democratic government, yes, they say, but yet they're still keeping the strongholds on the people of their Islamic beliefs. Now, I'm not talking about religion, I'm talking about from the political perspective. You know, hate the Jews, hate Israel, boycott Israel, that type of thing. That's still there, despite democracy saying everybody's equal. All right, let's look at this. In the Gaza Strip, they're using Europe and America to force Israel to give up the land. In Iraq, while they're talking about a new constitution to elect officials, there's still not the freedom of religion there that should be. In Egypt, there are youth seeking democracy with freedoms, but there's hardliners, the Islamic Brotherhood and other organizations fighting this type of thing. In Afghanistan, there was another generation that was trying to make democratic changes, but now the Taliban has come back in with the old way. There's total confusion there. Parts of Arabia, they let the West use their military bases at different times. They like the Western money. There we go again. But as far as trying to allow the religious freedom, people get arrested. You can't take a cross in. You can't carry a Bible into Arabia, etc. Turkey is called a secular Islamic nation, and they have a form of democracy, but there again, they have the radicals that are rising up. Syria, there's certain people in Syria who would love to have freedom. Same is true with Iran and the Persians, without going into a lot of detail. But watch what Daniel says. Now notice this. Let's talk about Islam, and let's talk about the clay of democracy and the iron of Islam. Whereas you saw the feet and toes, partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, the kingdom shall be divided, yet the strength of the iron shall be in it, just as you saw the iron mixed with ceramic clay. And as the toes of the feet were partly of iron and partly of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly fragile. You saw iron mixed with ceramic clay. They will mingle with the seed of men, but they will not adhere one to another, just as iron does not mix with clay. That tells you, ladies and gentlemen, where we are now. There's Islamic traditions versus democratic thinking. For example, in democracy, women have freedom, but in Islam, they don't always have that kind of freedom. The kingdom is strong, and the kingdom is partly broken. So we see this going on right now. The 2 feet were east and west, Rome and Turkey. Turkey had an empire from 1517 for 400 years, ruling in 3 continents and 27 provinces. But yet at the end of days, here's the point, it's going to come into 10 toes who are still clay and iron.
You will embark upon one of Perry Stone's most significant prophetic studies in recent years when you obtain his newest 2 DVD series, Unsealing the Daniel Cipher. In these 4 hours of study, Perry takes you into the mind and visions of the Hebrew prophet Daniel. You will glean eye-opening truth, including learning the nature and assignments of the future Antichrist and the possible identity and dangerous strategies of the 10 kings who will unite in a warlike kingdom. Perry pinpoints from a study of King Nebuchadnezzar and Daniel's vision, the very nation from where the beast kingdom rules. This new DVD series contains research Perry has never taught before, including a detailed explanation of the metal bands on the tree stump revealed in Daniel chapter 4. Perry also includes an important study on Daniel chapter 9, which details the theory of the 7-year tribulation. This 2-part DVD series is part of package offer DC 113. When you order the DVD series Unsealing the Daniel Cipher, Perry will also include the DVD teaching 12 Gates to Satan's Underworld. See and hear stunning research along with biblical evidence pointing to a subterranean world located under the earth's crust that houses both fallen angels and the spirits of unredeemed humanity. Perry will share about the scientific discovery of 12 magnetic gates at equal distances in the sea that may indicate the possible entrances to this forbidden world, a world that the souls and spirits of men must avoid at the time of their death. Learn why strange activity is reported in the Bermuda Triangle and other similar locations around the earth. Something is happening underneath us, and this DVD explains the mystery in detail. This DVD is a great resource tool to reach others for Christ. Perry's new 2-DVD series, Unsealing the Daniel Cipher, and the DVD 12 Gates to Satan's Underworld are available now for a donation of just $40 or more. Shipping and handling are included. Call toll-free 1-888-21-BREAD. That's 1-888-212-7323, or order online at perrystone.org. You may also send your donation of $40 or more to Perry Stone, P.O. Box 3595, Cleveland, Tennessee 37320. Request offer DC 113 when writing or calling. This powerful DVD package is available only through the ministry of Perry Stone, and your donation helps keep Manifest on in your area. We look forward to hearing from you today.
I can't say enough about thanking you for joining me around the world on the Manifest telecast each week. We're getting many testimonies from so many of you that are coming to know the Lord, being baptized in the Holy Spirit, and are learning biblical truth that you never knew or understood before. We give God all of the glory and praise for that. But we know without your help and support, it would be impossible. And so let me just say that this is the final week on the Manifest telecast that you'll be able to get the offer, which is the Daniel Cipher, 2 DVDs, 4 hours of teaching, and the 12 Gates of the Underworld. So if you've not ordered that yet, may I implore you to do so. It'll be a help and a blessing to you. Another thing I'd like to say is a great thank you to the hundreds of men and women who have joined us as partners. And this is our partners banner that we take with us to our meetings. But if you're not a partner of our ministry, there's a couple things you need to know. That when you partner with us as a partner Strike Force partner, you have access to a special website that you have to have a code word to get in. On that website is a daily devotional. On that website is a monthly blast from the past, messages that you've never heard me preach that go back 25 to 35 years ago. You have access to our yearly partners conference in OCI. You have access to go with me on an Israel trip, a partners-only tour. We have meet and greets, for greeting time with partners during our main meetings throughout the year on the weekends where we're traveling for the 5-night conferences. So contact our office or contact perrystone.org to get a partnership with our ministry. And we need you to help us because we have a lot to do in these last days. See you next week.
Coming this October to the Omega Center International in Cleveland, Tennessee, Perry Stone invites you to join him at the 2014 main event with powerful preaching from Brian Cutshaw, Kevin Wallace, Mark Casto, Jensen Franklin, and Perry Stone. Join us at the OCI Ranch for food, fun, and fellowship at Pam's Fall Festival. For more information, go to perrystone.org. Don't miss your chance for the ultimate refreshing at this year's main event. We'll see you there.
Perry Stone invites you to join him for his 2014 Israel tour. The dates are November 24th through December 3rd. Call 1-888-321-3629 or visit perrystone.org for more information and how to register. Seating is limited, so call today.